So good morning or evening, Cole. Pleasure to meet
Or good evening. I guess good morning for you.
you. Definitely. All right. So thanks for taking the time out of your day to meet with me and have our conversation on what it means to be a product manager.
No problem. No problem at all.
Is it okay if we just jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So one of the first questions I've got that I've been asking folks is just how'd you get into product management? What led you to want to be a product guy?
Yeah, that's probably the most interesting question that you get the most varied responses from existing product managers because no one ever gets into it the same way. It's a weird position. Personally, I think I got into it fortuitously because I ended up being a real product person. But how it actually happened was when I graduated, I was doing all sorts of odd jobs like consulting, and I was doing I had a small consulting business while I was in school. And during this time, I was doing stuff for tech stuff and then some even graphic design and even sales strategy and this sort of thing. And then ended up becoming a front-end engineer at a small startup in Austin, Texas. And so I kind of went through this phase where I'm doing, okay, some graphic design here, some engineering here. And to be honest, I was a pretty bad engineer and still am. And so I liked the topic of engineering. I liked, the subject matter and the problem solving, but I didn't like the actual coding itself. I was never couldn't stay focused on it. I would always get distracted with say marketing or, I don't know, chatting with users or like product strategy or something like this, or the design. And what I ended up doing was applying as a product manager at another smaller company in Austin, Texas. I don't know, at that time was probably about 60 people, and got a job as a product manager because I had kind of a wide-ranging background in most of the stuff that we were doing there. And that was like my official, first leap into product management. Although I should mention that the job that I was doing front-end engineering and before, I actually moved into sort of a product role, which was deciding okay, what are we doing next, and talking to users and this sort of thing.
Based upon a lot of what you've just talked about, what should somebody who's getting into product management focus on first? What did you focus on?
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on, I think you need to focus on your weak spots. So I could give the advice to someone that is coming from a certain background and they need to really focus on, let's say, technology, for instance. But if I was going to sort of generalize and say, what is the stuff that I had the most difficulty with, and I think that many PMs will have difficulty with regardless of their background when going into the role. One of them, the biggest one, will probably be communication and sort of this communication to stakeholders mastery, which is really tough. And most product managers are still learning it. And I would say all of them are still learning it because the stakeholders are always changing. Well, either you go to a different company or you start a different project. You're working with different people and you need to understand the best ways to communicate with certain people. And there's the old adage, which is the 5 different decks for 5 different groups of people. That product managers say, if you're presenting to the executives, you present one in one way. If you're emailing to marketing, you email in another way. If you're just talking to engineers, you probably say it in another way. And this is a really important topic to figure out. And it means if you're sending a very detailed email or giving a very detailed overview to one group of people, it doesn't mean that the board or the executives need to see that level of detail, and they have probably a different set of interests. So being able to understand relatively quickly what makes these stakeholders tick and what matters to them, and then target the information to those people in a way that resonates with them is something that everyone is going to have some trouble with, I think, starting out, because it's a very difficult thing to get very good at. And in fact, most product managers are still learning and will continue to learn basically forever as they, meet new types of people and work at new companies and this. So yeah, just being a little, I guess it's an emotional intelligence in a way. And for sure. It's something I'm still learning every day, and how to better communicate. Other than that, I would say there's probably two other things. One is just understanding technology. You don't have to be, there's a big debate on, do you have to be an engineer? Do you have to be a former engineer to be a product manager? And I think the answer is pretty clearly no. It depends on the type of product manager, obviously. But in general, it's a no. But do you have to be technical? Do you have to like understand what engineers are saying and understand what your product is doing behind the scenes? Yes, you should. You should understand it well enough to talk about it. Doesn't mean you have to be able to go in and read the code yourself or commit code. Although it's great if you can, it doesn't mean you have to. So just understanding technology, the basics, is extraordinarily important. And that's the super basics, like mobile versus non-mobile, and clients and servers, and how the internet works at a basic level is super. It seems silly, but very important. And so that's something that everyone needs to learn. Probably the third thing is maybe a little surprising, but you should get really good and comfortable like presenting and taking a topic that's otherwise not very exciting and making it exciting and kind of telling a story. So you're very much like a salesperson or sometimes a CEO, in that your job is to really tell a story and sell something through evidence, basically, to different audiences of people. So you have to be comfortable like assembling presentations, giving presentations, but synthesizing all this information that you need to tell people about.
That is an awesome response. I'm thinking the people who are watching this will really get some use out of it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I think the next question should dovetail into that, and that is continuing education. How do you continue learning as a product manager? How do you stay on top of things? What tools do you use? What do you think about in order to continue educating yourself?
Yeah, so that's a question that could also be a very big one. I think first of all, product management is kind of interesting in that there's no like mastery where you're just like, oh, you've mastered product management, because it's such a weird amorphous blob of a role. And there's this saying that like if you'd never leave your office thinking like, wow, I really suck at my job, then you probably do. Whereas I think there's some other roles in tech and just other industries in general where you can say very clearly denote that, okay, I'm like one of the best, people at this thing, like either in the world or in my industry. Product management is much, much different. And so you have to continue educating yourself in so many different ways. So the obvious answer is just to find out what you're bad at by seeking lots of input from other people, or not what you're bad at, but what you could help improve, and just work on that. And for some people, that's going to be like, from me, for example, the real like stakeholder management and emotional intelligence stuff didn't come naturally to me when I started out. The other things, maybe like the technical things, did come pretty naturally. But I know lots of other product managers where that stuff does come naturally and maybe something else doesn't. So just finding out what that weakness is and looking into it. And that's just as easy as asking people for feedback, because they will give it to you if you ask correctly. And then if you want to get into like, just sort of the blanket recommendations I would have for the role, it would be, there's a lot of things that take a long time to understand thoroughly. I won't say like master it or understand fully, but just thoroughly. And one of those things, for instance, is metrics. Metrics seem like a pretty easy topic to understand. How hard is it to understand like monthly active users, right? But when you delve into, product specific metrics and like what metrics affect other metrics and roll up to like a company metric, or how are we going to define success, you should really, and that's what I do, is just keep working at this stuff and questioning yourself on, is this the right metric? Is this thing that we said is going to like define success actually going to change user behavior in a meaningful way? Is that the way we want them to change? And there's all these strange things you just have to get used to, like for instance, external things that happen. Like if you're at a global company, for instance, like the one I work at, we have events that are not in any way related to the business, say religious holidays or times of year that affect metrics. And they're external factors, but you see them on your metrics dashboards, and you have to just get used to the fact that, okay, some things come along and like your metrics fall over for a few weeks or days, and there's nothing wrong, there's no bugs. So just getting used to these little things that happen like that is really important. So I don't know any way to get better at that than just doing it as much as possible and looking at metrics in just a bunch of different industries and from different companies, talking to your friends, etc. The other blanket recommendations I would make would be talking to users more than you do. I would say that most people don't, or maybe all people, it's safe to say that all people don't talk to users enough, because most people are in the office every day, and that means you're probably not talking to users. And there's really not a limit to like how much knowledge you can gain just from talking to people that are using your product. So it's something to aspire to for every PM, just to talk to users more, even more than you already are. You're always going to find something interesting. To continue educating yourself, you really have to stay on top of industry happenings. And that means, unfortunately, at the pace at which everything moves today, it means waking up and spending probably 30 or 40 minutes every single day just reading about what's going on and in your industry, but also just in tech. Let's say you're in a business in the technology field, like let's say where I'm at in the streaming music business. I'm still looking at what's going on in other industries that are not related to music. And that's because everything's kind of getting so crisscrossed and mashed together now that user habits on, let's say, a photo and video sharing app users will end up using that app and then 2 seconds later switching to your app. And so understanding where all of these things are going in general, technology is going in general, software and hardware wise, is going to be really, really important. So just read the news all the time and ask yourself what that means for you and your industry.
Where do you see the product management role going? You know, whether it's 2 years, 5 years?
I think, okay, first of all, I think that there's a shift happening right now in product management that, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of people that are really interested in the role. They're just kind of finding out that this exists. And at the same time, it's just as difficult to get into as it was a long time ago. And there are some companies like Google and Facebook and I think Twitter, they do like associate product manager programs. Microsoft, I think, does something similar. So you could do something like that, but it's always been pretty difficult for your average company to get involved in product management because they want someone with experience. And so I think we're seeing an interesting shift now where people are able to learn from taking classes to understand the role of product management, and then kind of figuring out how they can like take their prior experience in the workplace, assemble it into relevant product management experience, do a side project or something, and then demonstrate that to a company and get a job as like an associate product manager or something. So in short, people are going to be able to learn this skill, you know, without having to fall into it as like so many product managers of today did when they first started. And that's a good thing, because you're going to get people that are at heart, like truly product people that are really good at this stuff. They're going to be able to jump into it a little bit earlier than like people like myself that had to kind of like bash into the walls of being an engineer or designer or a consultant, you know, for 5 or 6 years before they fell into stuff. Product is going to change. Just to steal off of, you know, Ellen Chizo's answer when she did the interview was, and she's right, which is that you're going to see a lot more specialization in the product management role, both within like the tech industry, but also there's going to be, and there already are PMs that are outside of tech or are more focused in hardware. Product management's existed a long time in areas that are not technology, right? There's people in cosmetics brands and retailers that have been brand managers, right? Is what I guess they call them. And they're doing effectively the same thing without like the tech or the UX and UI. It's like packaging and ingredients and physical things. And then you've got so much coming out in terms of hardware, like drones and robotics, and you have artificial intelligence, and you're going to have you have lots of stuff coming around with healthcare. So you're going to have a lot of specialization in the same sense that today there's technical product managers that focus on things like doing say product management for search algorithms, which is usually a very technical role. At Google, they're very, very, very technical. The PMs that are working on search stuff, highly technical. And then you have less technical, but more user-centric PMs that are working on like product UX and like new features and that sort of thing. So you'll have those two, but you're going to have a whole lot more, I think, as this industry, the whole tech industry kind of infiltrates everything.
How do you know you're doing well as a product manager? What tools do you use yourself for introspection?
Yes. Okay. Well, you're going to have like the textbook answer to this is basically, well, you know you're doing well if your metrics are doing well, or if your product's doing well. And then, well, how do I know if my product's doing well? Well, you look at your metrics. Are your metrics doing well? But there's going to be a lot of times when, you know, organizationally or otherwise, it's just really tough to like ship stuff, or you're not able to make as many changes as you would like, as fast as you would like, and look at your metrics as frequently as you would like, or you're working on like back end stuff that's maybe longer term and planning for the future. So I'd say beyond that sort of textbook answer of obviously look at your metrics and look at the stuff you're trying to affect, if you're actually affecting it. I think there's some other answers as well, and that is, secondly, is your team, are you being a good motivator and leader like to your team? And is your team motivated to be working on what they're working on? And do they understand like why they're working on this stuff? And that goes for both your internal team, like your close team, if you're a product manager working on a specific feature with, you know, 2 or 3 or one engineer, one designer and 5 or 6 engineers on one feature or one feature set. Is that team motivated? But also, is the company, depending on the size of your company, of course, motivated to, do they understand why, you know, you're doing things, and are you painting a vision for them? And are they excited like for that? So are you communicating well? And because at the end of the day, you kind of are the de facto leader in terms of morale for the people that are building the stuff that you're basically deciding on what gets built. And it's your job very much to make sure that they're excited about it, they understand it, but they've also had input into it. You know, they don't feel ostracized. They feel like they're a part of this decision-making process. So that's a really important one. And you probably get that by just talking to them and saying, hey, are they motivated? Do they understand why we're doing all this? Just also asking bluntly for feedback is a great way as well.
Well, that I think concludes our time. Thank you so much. You have been extremely generous with your time.
No problem, Justin. It was a pleasure.
Be well.